What's up, guys? CT back with my 2014 SEC football preview and talking about Mississippi State Bulldogs. Dan Mullen back for another year at Mississippi State, and I think Dan Mullen's been pretty successful at his tenure at Mississippi State. They've been to bowl games just about every year he's been there, and the problem though with Dan Mullen is when you're winning 6 or 7 or even 8 games a year, every single year, what starts to happen is fan base starts getting a little bit greedy, and they're like, oh, Liberty Bowl again, Music City Bowl again, like when are we gonna go to a New Year's Day Bowl, or when are we gonna go to SEC Championship? That's what starts happening. And ask Kentucky. In the mid to late 2000s, Rich Brooks had Kentucky in a bowl game and winning the bowl game every single year. But it was, Liberty Bowl, Music City Bowl, bowls like that. And what the fans started getting tired of that. And Rich Brooks retires, Joker Phillips comes in, and the program goes down the drain. And suddenly, Music City Bowl starts sounding pretty good. But yeah, that's the problem right now. And Mississippi State's problem in general is they have trouble beating the top teams in the SEC and in the nation in general. Remember, they lost to Oklahoma State last year. Uh, they beat the bad teams. Mississippi State is the best bottom feeder in any conference in the country. They can beat any bad team in the country, and they can beat them handily. They're a solid team, but they just can't get over that hump. Will this be the year? It seems like a lot of people think so. A lot of people think that this is Dan Mullen's best team since he's been at Mississippi State. And quickly talking about, just a recap of last year, they went 7-6, and they finished with a huge win in the Egg Bowl over Ole Miss, and that makes Dan Mullen 4-1 against Ole Miss since he's been at Mississippi State. Pretty good. And they win a Liberty Bowl game against Rice, which and beat them pretty badly. That was just a mismatch. Yeah, getting into this year, they have 8 returning starters on offense and 8 on defense. And I was watching Dan Mullen's SEC Media Day press conference, and he said they're returning 30 players who have started in SEC games. So it's pretty impressive. It's pretty good. Key losses, though, real quick. Ladarius Perkins. I could not believe when I found out that Ladarius Perkins did not get drafted. I thought he was one of the more underrated players in the country last year. And I remember I was watching Mississippi State Auburn a couple years ago. I think it was actually 3 years ago. It may have been his freshman year, or maybe a sophomore year. Regardless, he really impressed me in that game. And he didn't quite have the career at Mississippi State that I thought he would, but nonetheless, he was a good back. He was a short, stockier guy, but really fast, really athletic. I think he can make someone's roster and contribute to someone's backfield in the NFL. I'll be keeping an eye on that. They lose Tyler Russell. Good riddance to him. If you're a Mississippi State fan, you have no problem with this. This is not really a key loss, but they didn't lose much, so there's not really much to talk about as far as their losses. Tyler Russell, he played good in 2012 when they went on that I think it was 8-0 start. Tyler Russell was flinging the ball around, and they're beating up on these smaller teams, and then the schedule got tougher, and I think they may have won one more game after that, if any. I can't remember. But yeah, scheduling was really the main reason they were 8-0. But Tyler Russell looked good then, but I don't know exactly what happened. I think he had some injuries that he was really hurting him, and then on came Dak Prescott, which I'll get to in a second. And another loss they had was Gabe Jackson. offensive guard. Not too big of a loss because I think they have their entire offensive and defensive lines besides that. So that shouldn't hurt them too bad. Key returners, Dak Prescott. I really am really big on Dak Prescott. I think he's by far the best quarterback that Mississippi State has had in a long time, if not ever. He's just a really gritty, tough guy. He can get it done on the ground. He's a power runner. He can run the ball like Dan Mullen likes to, and he has gotten a lot better as a passer. So he can beat you passing the ball, and I'm sure with a whole off season, uh, he's gotten much better throwing the football. Uh, Jamion Lewis, I think, is their best wideout. He's the number 4, the smaller, quicker receiver with dreads. If you're not familiar with him, uh, I think he's their biggest playmaker out wide. Maybe they're probably their biggest playmaker on offense in general. If you're not including Dak Prescott, he's going to be his best weapon, and definitely look out for Jamion Lewis. Very good wideout. Josh Robinson will be taking place of Ladarius Perkins, a really similar back to Ladarius Perkins. You know, kind of a smaller, not. I think he's a little bit taller than Ladarius Perkins, but a really strong uh, power runner. But he has some speed as well. So a very, I think he is going to make the loss of Ladarius Perkins not nearly as bad as it would be. So I think he's a solid back. Nothing spectacular. I don't think he is as good as Ladarius Perkins, but he could turn out to be better than Ladarius Perkins. We'll have to see. And entire defensive line. Probably the most underrated defensive line in the country is Mississippi State's. I think it's by far the best defensive line that Dan Mullen has had at Mississippi State, and I think this is what makes Mississippi State kind of a dark horse in the SEC this year. It makes them such a dangerous team. Is they finally have some of the bigs on the defensive line that the other top teams in the SEC have. So huge for them to have that, and their offensive line ain't too bad either. So absolutely huge for Mississippi State. They're returning the best quarterback that I think they've had since Dan Mullen's been there. They're returning pretty much their entire offensive line and pretty much their entire defensive line, who is pretty quality lineman. So that's really what's making Mississippi State a dangerous team this coming season. Real quick, we'll get to their 2014 schedule. Just a second. All right, they start out with Southern Miss at home. Shouldn't be too much trouble at all. Uh, then they follow up with UAB at home. So should start out 2-0. And then interesting, they play at South Alabama. Anytime a power conference team, one of the Power Six conference teams, goes to play at a small school at their home stadium, it's a really tricky situation because that's probably that's the biggest home game in South Alabama football history. You think about it. So that I don't know what kind of stadium they have or anything, but it's gonna be rocking, as rocking as it will ever be. Put it that way. But Mississippi State against South Alabama, still a mismatch. Mississippi State should take care of business there. Then they go to Death Valley to take on LSU, and I may give Mississippi State this game if they were at home, but at LSU, I'm not buying it really. LSU will have a down year to lose that game, which I don't think they're really going to have. Then they have a bye before they come back home to take on Texas A&M, and if you've watched my past previews, not big on Texas A&M at all. I think Mississippi State will win this by at least 10 points I like Mississippi State a lot in this game. And then this is probably their second biggest game of the year. They have Auburn coming into Starkville, and if they're gonna beat a one of the big boys this year, I think this is their best chance because later down the road they have Alabama on the road. So if they're gonna get one of the big team, one of the top three teams in the SEC this year, this is gonna be their chance. But I don't think they get it. I think Auburn's gonna be a little bit too good, but I think it'll be a really close game. I see it being a really close game and a very dangerous game for Auburn. Then they have a bye before they go to Kentucky, which I think they will win. But Kentucky gave them a fight last year on that Thursday night in Starkville. But I like them to get it done at Kentucky. Then they got Arkansas at home, which I think Arkansas is actually I don't think Arkansas is ever gonna really turn it around. I'll get into that when I get to Arkansas. But I like Mississippi State in that game as well. Then they got Tennessee Martin, and that should be a cakewalk. And then they go to Alabama, which I just kind of alluded to. That's maybe if they were in Mississippi State, but at Tuscaloosa, I mean they played them tough last year for pretty much 3.5 quarters in Starkville, but yeah, I gotta go with Alabama there. Then they got come back home for Vanderbilt. Definitely like Mississippi State in this game. Like I said, Mississippi State always beats the bottom feeders of the SEC. Can't beat the big boys, and Vanderbilt would I'm pretty sure will be a bottom feeder next year or this year. Then the game of the year. It's huge. It's turned into a huge rivalry. Dan Mullen and Hugh Freeze do not like each other. I can just feel it. And they go to Ole Miss to take on the Rebels. This game is a toss-up to me. It really is. Man, that will be a great game to watch. If you watched the game last year, it ended in overtime when Bo Wallace was running the ball, about to cross the goal line to tie it, and he fumbles it. Mississippi State recovers it in the end zone, and that's how the game ends. I'm gonna go with Ole Miss in this game simply because they're at home. If it were at Mississippi State, I would certainly pick Mississippi State, but I think Ole Miss gets revenge from what happened last year, and Ole Miss won I think pretty handily the last time they played at Ole Miss. So yeah, gotta go with the Rebels there. But man, it's really could go either way. Two dangerous teams in the SEC West, two rivals square off there. I'll definitely be watching that one. Let's count up their wins. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that leaves them at 8-4. They'll probably win their bowl game, put them at 9-4. I think, not for sure. I think that would give them the most wins that Dan Mullen has had since he's been at Mississippi State. So can't complain about that. If you're expecting them to do much more than that, then your expectations may be a little bit too high if you're a Mississippi State fan. But I think that about does it for Mississippi State. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.